So Paxton, thanks for being on. I really appreciate it. A natural place to start, we were talking before we're recording, is your interest in biomedical engineering. So curious as to like, how does one become interested in this field? Is something that you develop really at an early age, or something a little bit later on in life and your teenage years that you became enthralled with?
Great to be here, Nectar. Thank you so much for having me. Absolutely. So, my passion for the intersection of technology and medicine started early on for me. I grew up in the Boston area, just outside in Cambridge, Massachusetts. From an early age, started to get very interested in engineering, and ultimately started in middle school going to MIT robotics camps. And through a program at my high school, was able to also watch surgeries at Mass General Hospital as well as the Brigham. This really piqued an interest that started, as I said, at a very early point in my life, for understanding how healthcare was delivered, how the body worked, and also how modern machines, whether robotic or computer based, could help improve the standards of care and how that care was delivered. So it really started early on for me and continued through high school, through robotics clubs and the rest, into college, where I started studying biomedical engineering and continued this passion for design and product development. That ambition translated into my first job out of school, which was at Auris Health, a surgical robotics company, a startup at the time, out in Silicon Valley, where I was initially a summer intern and then an early engineer and the first product manager at the business. That company was focused on building kind of Swiss Army knife, for better terminology, of a robotic platform, with lung cancer being the first indication, which was really important to me because I had lost several grandparents to lung cancer. So was certainly an area of medicine relevant to my life. That was an amazing experience, and ultimately that company was bought for $3.5 billion, just shy, by Johnson and Johnson, and I returned to do both the data science masters as well as my MBA back at Harvard.
Yeah, so yeah, Oris is, pretty good success story. It came across working in that field with the customer of like, yep, pretty good exit, and I think just story overall. And in preparing for the interview, you mentioned data science, and then something I came across. One of your quotes was how you found this interest in data science, intersection of data science and health. So maybe to unpack that a little bit as to what do you mean exactly? What did you see as an opportunity in terms of like really this unexplored area of like healthcare that doesn't touch, like that's not been impacted by data science?
Yeah, so as I transitioned away from robotics and kind of moved out of that role at Oris, I reflected a lot on the experience I had had. And, one of the things that was very clear was there was a lot of work that was going into the mechanical implementation of these robotic systems, but not a ton of thought at that time was going into the data science behind it and the decision making that, could ultimately turn these systems into automated platforms. And so, I started. That was kind of my first, kind of tiptoe into the pond of data science. Along that robotic specter, but then very quickly started to become very passionate, and in terms of understanding better how data science was currently being implemented within the medical field, as well as how structured data was being handled across healthcare. And it doesn't take very long of a ton of digging before you realize that the data is dirty, the data is unstructured. It is a kind of a free for all over in the healthcare sector, and so. It became clear that through very thoughtful product development, you could not only develop and deliver true clinical improvements through, the systems that you might deploy as a business, but you could also help a lot of these healthcare organizations structure their data better, which in turn, helps reinforce the products and also enables the development of new ones. And so all of that thought process really happened for me over the course of a couple years, and really motivated me to get a master's in data science back here at Harvard, which really kind of kicked off my fascination with AI in medicine.
Interesting, yeah. And then, so how from there that lead you to like, hey, I'm going to start a company in the space, right? Jumping with both feet in. So was it a long process, or was it like a spur of the moment decision?
It was definitely a long process for me, and I think everyone's process is a little bit different, but it really happened over the course of about a year. I bumped into the problem of embryo ranking with convolutional neural nets as part of my capstone project for my data science master's. This was back in probably 2019, I would say, in the spring, and so. I that summer I went and worked at Google X as a product manager there, and had an amazing experience. Came back and continued to be kind of passionate and enthralled with this idea of how could we improve IVF. When I first ran into the problem within the Harvard Research kind of institution, it resonated with me immediately. My younger brother's an IVF baby. I know so many people that have benefited from successful outcomes from in vitro fertilization and infertility care. The societal benefits of infertility treatments, from supporting working people starting families later on in life, where the LGBTQ plus communities is just an incredible area of medicine to be working in. And beyond that, the technicals, from a technical standpoint, it was uh, a very unique problem. And one of the really interesting things about infertility is that with any input of data science, you have a very clear endpoint, which is, was it a successful pregnancy? So unlike a lot of these other areas of AI and medicine, which I kind of studied and reviewed, there was no human subjectivity to that output, which made it a very clean data science problem. So I got very passionate about it. It obviously took me about a year to really formulate how I wanted to enter into it or really build my own company. But it was an incredible process, and I think having taken so long to really wrap my head around the problem and become increasingly passionate about the execution towards delivering a solution here. I think it really helped as we started to build the business, as a formal company.
Yeah, I might be getting ahead of my skis here. So I have a random question. Like, so everyone knows the story, the founding story of Amazon started with books, and Bezos knew that he was eventually going to move beyond books because books was the easiest format to start with, right? So I find an interesting analogy when you mentioned IVF, where it's like there's a very clean kind of outcome, right, which is needed when you're working in data. Do you see opportunities eventually for Alife to move beyond just IVF? Or am I really speculating here? And it's like it's still early days, and you have a big enough problem to focus on. So probably not. Probably best not to go too far out.
It's a very fair question. I'd be lying if I hadn't said I hadn't thought about it. The vision has certainly expanded a tremendous amount since where I started. So I started just on a single point of in vitro fertilization, which is the embryo prioritization step of deciding which one goes back into the mother first. That was the research project I originally bumped into. From there, our ambitions for Alife have really grown. We now have three products under development, with a fourth in exploration, areas. We have, really outlined and understood the patient journey from start to finish of an IVF process. And our goal is really to help create analytics tools to optimize every step of that patient journey from start to finish. So the vision of A-Life just within infertility care has certainly expanded, and it really is a growth from where's a strong entry point to what else could we use with this, do with this technology. Without getting out ahead of my own skis, I will say that the thought has certainly crossed our mind. We are always looking at new opportunities to apply data science, and especially, kind of take the learnings we've created so far within A Life to other areas of medicine. But as of yet, we are really focused on, the infertility opportunity. It's a massive opportunity. It's a big market. It's a growing market, and so we certainly have our work cut out for us just within that clinical specialty.
Yeah, I was going to say you probably have a multi-billion-dollar company just in that area, but it's still fascinating to think of the possibilities, and even just like you mentioned, infertility is such a huge field. One question in preparing again for the interview, it's like it seems that the data is showing that there's a rise in fertility. I don't know if it's globally or at least in North America. So do you have any inkling as to why that is? And so like why, like from a business perspective, it's great because you guys are focusing on a problem that's growing in importance, not diminishing, but it's still kind of shitty for mankind that this is growing in importance, right? So curious to hear you as to like what are the theories out there?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different debates around this topic. Undeniably, the sperm counts in males has dropped precipitously. about 50% or about a percent a year, 50% over the last 50 years. And similarly, miscarriages rates are on the rise. I don't think there's any one factor that you can point to. I think there's many factors across the board, whether it's more educated people having families later. I think there are certainly environmental concerns out there that are valid around plastics and in our food and water sources. I think it's a lot of things. And you look at the global rates of fertility, which are decreasing mostly from natural reasons, frankly, around educations of various populations and increased adoption of birth control and contraception. I mean, these are really, I think, in general, some good trends. There is a tweet that I do, kind of enjoy, which Elon Musk, tweeted out several months ago, saying that the reduction in fertility rates is perhaps the single biggest danger to the future of humanity. That's something that beyond the hyperbole, we do take to heart. I mean, this is such an important aspect of what it is and what it means to be human. And obviously, the viability of future generations of our species is contingent on our ability to continue to reproduce. So I do think that there is a kind of species level mission to A Life and what we're working on. It certainly keeps me and a lot of the team very motivated by the work that we're doing and the patients that we're helping. And I hope that this trend, over time, is able to be counterbalanced with great technology and improvements to our environmental, kind of approaches to things. Now, there have been debates on both sides. I've seen some counter arguments asking, well, how much sperm count is enough sperm count, and things like that, and is this really a catastrophe, or is this, are we still okay, and we still have plenty of genetic material out there. I'll leave that debate to the experts. But I think the trends are alarming and the trends are real. So we have, as a society, we'll have to keep tracking this. And I do think there's going to be a lot of opportunity within this sector, especially given, just how critical it is to an individual's life and how many people, it's 1 in 8 or about 12% of the population struggle from infertility at some point. And that's just an astronomical number. So I think there's going to be a lot more investment in infertility. I think you're going to see more businesses crop up here, and I think the problem, as it gains notoriety, there's going to be real opportunity for many entrepreneurs like myself.
Yeah, you mentioned that it comes down to like a demographic problem, and like I think one thing I've been reading about and learning about is like this is a real big issue, right? Like we can't, mankind has to continue to grow, otherwise it's going to cause this whole slew of issues, right? I remember reading this stat or hearing about it that in China they're projected to have half their population by the end of the century, which is kind of crazy, right? If you think about there's 1.5 billion people in China today, and there's only going to be like half in 80 years. That's kind of nuts, right? So I don't think that's a good thing. So it seems that you guys are obviously working on a very, very important problem. What's the starting point? Is the starting point an individual clinic where you guys prove it out? Is it taking multiple clinics with your software? So what is the starting motion?
Yeah, so with anything in data science, it's so important to have data, and that comes from our clinical partners. So most of the last year has been spent, one, building the technical, actual software development, and two, building relationships and partnerships with the largest clinics in the United States. And we're very lucky and have very wonderful partners that have contributed data. Our development, collaborators help us design our software and our technologies, help give us feedback as we test it. So that's really been an important criteria. But when I talk to our clinical partners about what we're doing and what our approach is, I have to remind them and really share this, so that it's really, our goal here is really just to start the engine. Once the product is in market, then through that product, we're going to be structuring and collecting much, much larger data sets that we can then use to reinforce our algorithms, develop new algorithms, and continue to build better and better AI to help with infertility. And so that's really kind of the overall strategy that we're taking. In terms of placement, I mean, we're hoping to work with everyone. We want to work with kind of as many different partners as we possibly can. It helps us have a more diverse data set. We're very lucky in that the data we have is demographically incredibly diverse and representative of the U.S. population, which is a big problem across data science, and really, is a huge asset for us. We also have a lot of diversity on our team and our cap table and our investors, and so all of that is incredibly important to kind of driving our products out into the market. But to answer your question more directly, we are going to be working with a few select clinical partners, doing pilot studies with them, continue to gather data in the real world before we roll this out to the broader market at large.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. And how much has the IVF process changed, like over the past decade or two? Has it been relatively static, or has there been a bunch of innovation?
There has definitely been innovation. I wouldn't say that it's been static, but it has been slow. This has been a game of inches at the end of the day. IVF really started a little more than 50 years ago. It's continued to grow, but a lot of it, the new technologies, they claim to be silver bullets. They can't actually improve the outcomes by a meaningful amount. I think this area of medicine, like many areas of medicine, unfortunately, there's no massive step change that we can create overnight here, right? And so the approach that we've taken is that, all right, understanding that there's no silver bullet, so to speak, that we can just drop in and radically change the outcomes. Let's try to optimize every step of this process, and through that optimization, those compounding improvements will end up with a step change worth of actual clinical benefit. So I think there's kind of a difference in terms of how we are approaching this area of medicine. There is a lot of excitement right now within the IVF community for artificial intelligence, and so we're very lucky in that we're the only company in the United States really building this technology, and so we're in a unique position to really go out, develop the great tech. Do it right, focus relentlessly on the physician experience and on the patient experience, and delivering true clinical benefit, and then validate that with our clinical partners through rigorous studies.
Yeah, the product side seems clear. What about on the business model side? Is it something that you're still working on? Like, is it going to be insurance? Is it going to be the clinics or the end customer, or are you still figuring it out? And for now, just product focused.
So it's a great question. Amazingly, about 75% of IVF in the United States is out of pocket pay, which is a remarkable statistic. There are, 11 or 12 mandated states where there is some coverage, but those coverages can range from just the diagnosis being covered, or $20,000 worth of coverage being covered, up to some states that actually do have good coverage up to $100,000. For reference, the average successful outcome in IVF is $61,000. So to have a successful baby, it's 60 grand. So, for us, where we see value is we want to create a technology that can be implemented across the board at all these clinics. So the software itself is free to install at a clinic. And then we charge the clinic a standard price, and the clinic adds a markup and then charges the patient as an add-on fee. This is a very standard approach to the product business model within IVF. We've seen other technologies like PGT, which is pre-implantation genetic testing, done very similarly. So we're following a tried and true playbook. But I would say that my ambition and my hope, and I think this is a realistic possibility for this type of technology, is that this ends up being standard of care. I think the benefit to artificially analyzing using AI, these different embryos or optimizing different steps of this process, is really something that over time I believe more patients are going to not only demand but consider, just responsible healthcare. The idea about, historically that your clinician over the course of their, 20 to 30-year career collects enough data to be able to accurately optimize the treatment recommendations for a unique new patient they see. That's been a wonderful, kind of approach to medicine historically based on the technologies available. But we now are in this world where AI can scan and digest, hundreds of thousands of historical patients and look for correlations and patterns all over the United States, so that when a new patient comes into the clinic, the AI can say, "Oh, I've seen a patient just like this. They were in." XYZ city in XYZ corner of the country. But because I've seen them before, and because I can analyze, even millions of patients over the course of a quick training, I can create a very specialized and personalized treatment recommendation for this patient. And so I ultimately think that's where a lot of medicine is going to head, especially within these specialty areas. But that's really how we think about the business model for A Life.
Yeah, interesting, interesting. What's your biggest uncertainty right now? Like thing that you're like kind of working on to solve, like as a big challenge for this year?
For this year, the really interesting things about AI is that it's really new. There have not been very many companies in the AI medical space, and in fact, if you look closely at those companies that are in the AI medical space, most of them are actually tailored towards pharmaceutical. Many of them actually sell their products to reduce the burden of clinical trials or help with enrollment into big clinical studies. Very few of them are really focused on improving patient outcomes directly. And now they may have some small product, but the vast majority of their business is really on the B2B side towards these outside biotech companies. We are relentlessly focused on the patient. But what that means is that the regulatory bodies are really kind of understanding this for the first time and trying to figure out exactly how to regulate it. So we have fantastic partners at the FDA that we are working very closely with to understand how best to test and prove the efficacy and safety of our devices. And we continue to work with them to help, define how these types of technologies in the future could be analyzed or should be, really regulated. So I would say, that's a very standard area of medicine and especially medical technology that, will always be important to us. We've done a nice job of diversifying our product portfolio away from that regulatory risk. So we do lots of different things, some that are FDA regulated, some that do not need FDA regulation at all. So that's been a very nice thing about our business. Beyond that, I think there's just the excitement of putting a platform out, and we're thrilled that we've actually developed the software, we've developed the AI, we've pulled it together, and we've done all the legwork. We've figured out how to build it correctly and how to fit it within the current paradigm and the protocols. So we're really excited to get the system out and being used, and that'll be a really fun milestone for the next kind of 6 months to a year.
Yeah, that's interesting. And will you want to build a consumer facing brand? Well, like like regular people need to know what a life is, or is it going to really be behind the scenes and something more B2B? Let's say.
Absolutely. Our goal is to be both a B2B and a D2C brand. At the end of the day, again, our primary and sole focus is on improving the patient experience. And, improving the technology that's at the IVF lab is really just a means to that end. But we are building tons of products and tools to help future parents and IVF patients, go through this process more streamlined, with more transparency, feel more empowered. So we're really focused on that end patient, and so we are absolutely investing in building a D2C awareness and a D2C brand for the A Life ecosystem.
Yeah, that's really cool. And yeah, I don't know if you fall in the category of deep tech. At least I will label you guys as deep tech. And you raised some money, some pretty well known names, like obviously Lux Capital, which is heavily involved in I want to say hard problems, but the founder of 23andMe and some really cool names. How was the fundraising process the first time? Right, as a first time founder, obviously getting these marquee names. So curious to hear you a little bit and get your comments on that whole process.
We were really lucky in that IVF, unfortunately, is an area of medicine that touches so many people. So just about everyone we tried to raise money from said either they've been through it, they have a friend, a sister, or brother. It's really remarkable how pervasive this technology is, and so it was pretty straightforward for us to go out and say, look, this is an area of medicine that we think recent advancements in data science could make a real impact in, and we see some very clear in kind of signals that this is going to be a great area to build a business around. So we were very lucky to have the support that we've had. I will say to other people that are out there or other entrepreneurs, we had the luxury of getting to know our investors really well before taking money from them. And so, Dina Shacker, who's on our board, is just incredible. And we were so lucky that we got to spend a whole year informally getting to know Dina. I spent monthly meetings with her, just getting to know and working together through problems. And so when we ended up taking money from Lux, it really just felt like signing a formality. It didn't really even feel like a massive change in the company because we'd already been working together, and her passion for what we've been building was felt, in every interaction. And she and I now, work incredibly closely together, which is a super unique thing for an investor. At the seed stage, you're almost bringing on a co-founder at some level. Your seed investor is going to be there helping and guide you through the PR releases, through your investment strategy, through the business model creation, everything. So, finding someone that complements your skill set as the entrepreneur or entrepreneurs is super important. And we've been very fortunate to work with incredible people and incredible partners within the investment community.
Yeah, that's an amazing story, and I really like how bringing on money, right? It's like it's not really about bringing on money; it's about bringing on a key partner, right, and a key person wearing that hat. And I think the best success stories are when the board meetings are really about tackling key issues and key problems versus dealing with internal politics, etc. So it's like it looks like you have an amazing relationship with your investors. So the hats off. Maybe talk about the industry a little bit. Have you thought about any ways to just accelerate this field, right? Are there any ways, or is it just, listen, there's the FDA, it takes months. I've invested in a health tech startup, and the FDA, it's fun to I'll use that word. Are there any ways to accelerate? Are there any ways to disrupt, to use the buzzword, to move faster? Or listen, it's health, it's people, like we can't joke around. It's people's livelihoods. So we just need to follow the process.
I think it's a combination. I think we're doing some really interesting things. I mean, just on face value, we're analyzing human embryos with artificial intelligence. I mean, just putting those words together gets me really excited about what we've been doing, and the fact that from a technical, history standpoint, we're now at this point where we can do stuff like that. I mean, it's an unbelievable and unprecedented time where we can combine these types of computational and biological technologies to do amazing things like this. Um, to answer your question, I think, and this has been well documented, we're seeing a really profound shift in the medical technology field away from focusing on the provider first and foremost towards really focusing on the patient, and building experiences around the patient, marketing to the patient, building patient focused brands. And I think that is unsurprisingly paralleled with the rise in kind of the tech savvy younger patient consumer and healthcare consumer. And so, I think to answer your question, there's a lot we want to do within the medical, hard medical sciences, but there's as much to do just within, true patient awareness and, helping them navigate a very convoluted process and helping them coordinate their care and get communication. There's so many things that we want to build to really create an end-to-end platform to improve infertility that we're certainly not just sitting on our hands idly. We have so many different initiatives going at the same time, and so many different products we're building in concert, that it's fantastic. But it means that we're moving at a lightning pace at every moment.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Maybe if we zoom out, let's say like in 10 years' time, what do you think will be commonplace that today sounds like science fiction?
That's a great question. I think in long term, I was mentioning this a little bit earlier. I think we're already seeing this trend away from relying on purely the historical experience of a single clinician or, maybe even just two clinicians, to leveraging large data sets to find personalized treatment pathways. I think we are going to start seeing artificial intelligence, machine learning, whatever you want to call computational based pattern recognition, to be at the heart of more and more clinical decisions across the board. To the point in a decade from now, when you go into a doctor for whatever treatment, I think you're going to see 4 or 5 different sensors in there, maybe more, that are taking vitals, taking readouts, taking photos, taking images, different types of inputs. And I think all of those are going to be analyzed by artificial intelligence in a decade. And they should be, right? I mean, I think as we structure more of our data, as a lot of the data is lost, unfortunately, right? Like data from, I mean, modern medicine is not even that old. Modern medicine is really like 100 years old, which is wild to think about. But you look at data from 80 years ago, like that data is not particularly relevant today, unfortunately, in most cases. But as we have and treat more people and time goes on, we're in this new tech savvy world where we've got large databases and the infrastructure to house it. You're going to see that there's going to be these amazing things that we can do with that data. And really tailor everyone's treatment to that specific individual, and base that recommendation, on millions of historical data points. So that's what I think. I think the future for whether it's primary care or super specific things like cancer drugs, which we've already seen done, um, IVF treatment, whatever it might be, I think you're going to see more sensors connected to machine learning or AI based computational capacity on the back end. And I think that's a trend that is already started, and I'm really excited to see it continue. Both behind the scenes, and also more directly to the patient.
Yeah, Paxton, I think it's a great way to kind of end the conversation. And like, really, I think this conversation has been enlightening for me. I'm going to definitely bookmark it and want to go back in a few years and just say, like, see how much we've progressed. And it just seems like you guys are working on such an important key problem, but also with, to use the expression, a blue ocean ahead of you, right? Like, there's nothing being done here, or at least it seems like we're still a little bit in the Middle Ages in terms of understanding really our bodies and health as overall. So my hat's off to you guys. And look, I'm going to like set up a Google alert for Alife and like keep following updates on what you guys are doing. So maybe final question for you would be, what's the best place to learn about the work if people want to connect?
Yeah, alifehealth.com is where we try to keep everyone updated on our progressions. Keep an ear out. Please sign up, and we'll keep you up to date via newsletters and on social media. But we have big things that we're working on, and excited to share that with everyone. So hopefully you'll be hearing about us in the not too distant future.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Paxton.
Thank you very much for having me. Great to be here.